evening, wherever you happen to be on the continent of Africa. My name is Sam Edukumi from Ghana, and I'm speaking on behalf of Ghana as a party to the Rotterdam Convention this morning. And, I have other people also here in the webinar who also play some part. Miss Nicola Powell and also Charles, so come in a point in time. So, as a brief introduction, you can hear me? We all know that one of the main aims of the Rotterdam Convention is actually a shared responsibility for managing international trade in certain hazardous chemicals and pesticides. We also know that the foundation of the Rotterdam Convention is information sharing. This is to enable decision making. As Africans, we know our situation very well, that we are a net importer of chemicals and chemical products. We therefore need these chemicals, particularly for agriculture and household purposes. A large population or percentage of our population are into agriculture, which is more or less subsistence farming because we don't have the large industries around us. We don't have the plantations. For that matter, a lot of our population, which are the vulnerable people, are exposed to high concentration of chemicals, pesticides for that matter, affecting their health and other environment as well. Knowledge and information is therefore key for our vulnerable populations. I'm sure we know the challenges that the Rotterdam Convention is facing in terms of its effectiveness due to the inability for the COP to really list chemicals in Annex VIII. Several attempts to rectify the situation to ensure effectiveness of the convention are not being achieved. And I believe this is an opportunity with this amendment to ensure effectiveness of the Rotterdam Convention. And I'm only appealing to our African country parties to the convention to embrace these amendments. As we begin to explain or to go into the amendment, I believe that we will all begin to make reason and then support this initiative by a number of parties who are concerned about the convention. So on that note, I would like to give the microphone from my end here to Ms. Nicola Powell to make a PowerPoint presentation. Nicola, are you ready?
Thank you, Sam. Yes, hello everyone. Good morning to those of you on the African region, I think, and perhaps good afternoon and good evening from Australia. My name is Nicola Powell. I am the focal point for the Rotterdam Convention here in Australia. I will be delivering the main presentation for you today in this session. But first, I would like to ask the Secretariat to please play a short video for your information. Thank you, Secretariat.
The chemicals industry is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. There are over 350,000 chemicals circulating in the global economy. The aim of the Rotterdam Convention is to share the responsibility for managing international trade in certain hazardous chemicals. It empowers importing countries to decide whether to accept chemical imports and under what conditions, and requires exporting countries to respect those decisions. The foundation of the convention is information sharing to enable sound decision-making. The major provisions of the convention are triggered when a chemical is listed in Annex III. A chemical is listed in Annex III of the convention when two parties from two different regions have taken action to ban or severely restrict the chemical. The Convention's Chemical Review Committee confirms that the basis for those actions meets the Convention criteria. and the COP agrees to list the chemical in Annex VIII. This listing process has worked well, but unforeseen circumstances have prevented listing of some chemicals, despite the majority of parties wanting to do so. This undermines the implementation of the Convention and limits the ability of parties to better control imports of hazardous substances. In May 2023, the COP will be asked to consider a proposal to amend the Convention text to create a new annex in which chemicals can be listed if agreement to list them on Annex III cannot be reached. How will the amendments work in practice? The amendments to the Convention text, creating the new Annex VIII and associated obligations, will only apply to those parties that ratify the amended Convention. The process for listing chemicals in Annex III will remain the same for all parties to the Convention. If the COP agrees to list the chemical in Annex III, there is no need to discuss an Annex VIII listing. If the COP cannot agree to list a chemical in Annex III, the parties to the amended Convention can decide to list the chemical in Annex VIII instead. Preferably, this decision will be taken by consensus. But if this isn't possible, it can be taken by a 3/4 majority vote. Parties to the amended Convention will be able to export any Annex VIII chemical to another party only if an import response has been transmitted. So let's recap. Looking at the COP decision process for listings, if the amendments are adopted and once they enter into force. The Chemical Review Committee recommends a chemical for listing in Annex III. The COP agrees to list the chemical in Annex III. All pre-existing processes and obligations for Annex III chemicals apply. Or, the COP cannot agree to list the chemical in Annex III. Parties to the amended Convention agree by consensus or 3/4 majority to list the chemical in Annex VIII. The decision and the decision guidance document are transmitted to all parties. An importing party must provide its import response before any Annex VIII chemical can be exported to them. The chemical remains on the COP agenda for a future decision on listing in Annex III. What are the benefits of the proposed amendment? It provides an additional tool for some countries facing difficulties with managing unwanted shipments of hazardous chemicals. It will help countries to take domestic action to either manage the import of a chemical or not allow the import. It retains the aim of sharing responsibility for sound management of chemicals. It builds on existing convention processes, which will remain unchanged, including listing chemicals in Annex III by consensus. We hope you can support this proposal, and by doing so, support the continuing success of the Rotterdam Convention.
Thank you very much, Emily. Could I ask you to go to slide 3, please? Thank you very much. I will just talk briefly about the aim of the Rotterdam Convention. So with over 350,000 chemicals circulating in the global economy, the aim of the Rotterdam Convention is to enable countries to make informed decisions through an information sharing process, and its main goal is to share the responsibility for managing the international trade of certain hazardous chemicals. This allows parties to decide whether or not to accept certain hazardous chemicals as imports and under what conditions, and exporting countries are required to respect those decisions. Exporting parties must obtain permission, known as prior informed consent, from an importing party before they can export any chemicals listed in Annex III. The Rotterdam Convention does not ban the manufacture, use, or trade of chemicals. Next slide, please. So the process for listing a chemical in Annex III occurs in this way that you see on the screen in front of you. the major provisions of the Convention are triggered when a chemical is listed in Annex III. The process for most chemical listings begins when one or more parties in two or more regions notify the Secretariat that they have taken final regulatory action on a chemical, meaning they've either banned or severely restricted the chemical. Then the Secretariat reviews the information provided by these regions, and if it meets the information requirements outlined in Annex I, the Secretariat forwards the information to the Chemical Review Committee, or the CRC, for their assessment against the criteria for listing in Annex II. If the CRC determines the Annex II criteria are met, it recommends to the Conference of the Parties that the chemical should be listed in Annex III. And finally, of course, the COP decides whether to include the chemical in Annex III. Next slide, please. So, what problem is the proposal trying to solve? The Convention has worked well for the 54 chemicals that are currently listed in Annex III. However, unfortunately, the COP has not been able to agree to list some chemicals, despite the CRC finding they meet all the listing criteria and recommending them for listing. Some parties are opposing the listings because these chemicals are still needed in their countries or are still exported by their countries, even though chemicals listed in Annex III can still be traded, as long as prior informed consent has been obtained from the importing party. When the COP cannot agree to list a chemical that has been recommended for listing by the CRC, it undermines the Convention by eroding confidence in the listing process, limiting information sharing, and the ability of parties to control imports of hazardous substances. Next slide, please. So, what is the proposal? The proposal is to create a new annex to the Convention, Annex VIII. If the COP cannot agree to list a chemical in Annex III, despite the CRC having recommended the chemical for listing, parties to the amended Convention may propose its listing in Annex VIII. The amendments to the Convention will establish the process for listing a chemical in Annex VIII and give effect to the rights and obligations arising from a listing in Annex VIII. This new annex is a means for importing parties to benefit from the prior informed consent process and the information provided in the decision guidance document, pending consideration of a chemicals listing in Annex III. If the COP decides to adopt the proposal, parties to the Convention will have the opportunity to ratify the amendment. Next slide, please. So how will it work? The process for listing chemicals under Annex III will remain the same for all parties to the Convention. And if the COP agrees to list a chemical under Annex III, there is no need to discuss an Annex VIII listing. However, if the COP cannot agree to list a chemical under Annex III, the parties to the amended Convention can consider listing the chemical in Annex VIII. And preferably, a decision to list a chemical in Annex VIII would be taken by consensus. But if consensus cannot be reached, the decision can be taken by a 3/4 majority vote. Once a chemical is listed in Annex VIII, all parties to the amended Convention will be bound by the obligations relating to Annex VIII under Articles 10 and 11, and the chemical cannot be exported without explicit prior informed consent from the importing party. Importantly, chemicals listed in Annex VIII will still be considered for listing in Annex III and will remain before the COP for a future decision on listing in Annex III. There would be no change in the procedures for chemicals already listed in Annex III or for any chemical the COP agrees to list in Annex III in the future. The proposed amendments would not affect the operations of the CRC or its recommendation process to the COP in accordance with Articles 5 to 7 of the Convention. Next slide, please. This matrix shows how the process will work if the proposal is adopted for parties to the amended Convention and parties who have not ratified the amended Convention. You can see on the horizontal axis that it gives you the importing party status, and on the vertical axis, it gives you the exporting party status. So if both the importing and exporting party have ratified or have not ratified the amendment, it's very straightforward, as you can see from the descriptions here. The situation where it is slightly more complex is if the importing party has ratified the amendment and the exporting party has not. If you have a look at the box on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see that the importing party would be bound by Article 10, which describes the obligations of the importing party, and the exporting party would not be bound by Article 11, which is where the obligations for exporting parties are described. However, the outcome of this would simply be that the listing process and availability of information through the decision guidance document would help the importing party to assess the potential risks and take action to manage imports through its own national frameworks and policies. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of the proposed amendment? Well, the Rotterdam Convention provides an early warning system for countries to help protect themselves against certain hazardous chemicals moving through international trade. The proposal will extend this system to help countries who are facing difficulties with managing unwanted shipments of hazardous chemicals. It will help countries to take domestic action to manage hazardous chemicals, and in particular, help them to make a decision about whether to allow the import of a chemical or not to allow the import. It retains the aim of sharing responsibility for sound management of chemicals, and it builds on existing convention processes which will remain unchanged, including the process for listing chemicals in Annex VIII by consensus. Next slide, please. You can find the links to the proposal itself, the explanatory video that you just saw, and a brochure that explains in more detail the proposal on the Rotterdam website. If you can see here on the screen, you can follow where the green highlighted boxes are through to find the proposed amendments section of the convention website, where there are links to the proposal and to the video and the brochure. And that concludes the main presentation. So we can open the floor to questions, I think, if you're happy to do that, Sam, and I think Charlie is here as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Nicola, for the brief presentation. So, colleagues, we have the opportunity now to ask questions. So the floor is open. I'm trying to moderate the hands with the help of the Secretariat. So the Secretariat can help me to find out if hands are raised. I'm checking my own. I'm not seeing it yet, but please let me know. I think there's a chat bot also there. Those of you who cannot perhaps speak due to internet connectivity problems, challenges, perhaps you could send some chats and the Secretariat can help us read those ones as well. So the floor is open, please.
If I may, there is a raised hand from Vince.
Yes. Vince, please unmute yourself and speak up.
Yes,
Please mention your name and where you're coming from.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairperson. My name is Vince Rangasamy from Mauritius, and I'm very happy to be here in this meeting. I just wanted to get some clarification about the Annex VIII. So if, let's say, the Annex VIII, it's like country to country, what I mean is, let's say, Mauritius and I don't know, maybe South Africa, they agree on banning certain substances. So the Annex VIII is only applicable to those two countries?
Thank you so much. Is that all?
Yeah, it's just this concept, but that's not very clear to me. But I want to.
Okay. Let's see if Nicola or any of us can maybe answer that question. Nicola, you want to?
I can certainly try. Thank you, Sam. And thank you for the question. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name. It was Vince. Was it Vince?
Vince.
Vince. And I'm sorry, my screen is terrible here. It's not telling me much information at all. So where is Vince coming from?
Mauritius.
Mauritius. Thank you. Thank you very much. So if I understood the question correctly, I think you were asking what is the situation if both the countries, the importing and the exporting country, have banned the chemical, or were you asking whether they have both ratified the new Annex VIII? Can I just
Yes,
get some clarity on that?
yes. I just maybe my question was not clear enough. Let's say there's a group of countries, okay,
Yep.
that accepted to ratify the convention Annex VIII, okay,
Yep.
and there are some countries that did not accept, like there was no consensus, just like in the previous COP for the Annex III. So what I wanted to know is whether the Annex VIII is how do I say it? Like it varies from countries to countries,
Yes.
or
Yes.
is it a permanent Annex VIII which is applicable to every country?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the clarity. The Annex VIII will only apply to those parties that ratify the amendment to the Convention. So if the COP decides to accept the proposed amendment, then there will be a process where parties will be able to ratify the amendment. And once, I believe it is the 90th, the 3/4 of the parties have ratified the amendment, then the amendment will enter into force for those parties that have ratified it. So yes, there can be a situation where the Annex VIII applies to not all the parties to the convention, but only those who have ratified it. Does that answer your question, Vince?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, Vince, if I may add a little bit, you know that previously at the convention, at the COP, about 98% of the parties actually are in favor of, say, the work of the CRC and are ready to, list the chemical into Annex III. Unfortunately, one or two countries oppose, and because the Rotterdam Convention does not give room for, say, voting, but the consensus, it means that all the work done, is more or less zero. We cannot proceed. But many parties, majority, almost all, are in favor for information sharing through the convention. So to avoid that kind of situation, which is really frustrating, majority of the parties can now amend or those who will ratify the Annex VIII or the amendment have the opportunity to really, get the chemical onto the Annex VIII, and therefore have the opportunity to really ensure that the convention is running well, effectively. So, and then as Nicola explained, it goes through those processes and then we get the convention going. Anytime those parties want to come back, I think they can register or they can ratify the new amendment and also be part of it. Or it means that it can also go into Annex III when all parties agree. So that, I think we don't lose time, we don't lose effectiveness, and whatever. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. That was a very good explanation. And I think just to add to that, I think it's important to understand that those parties then who've ratified Annex VIII can benefit from that listing in the meantime, until such time that at a future COP, hopefully the rest of the parties can agree to list it in Annex III. But it's very important, I think, that those countries can then benefit in the meantime from a listing in Annex VIII.
Let me ask John, if John, we want to chip in some explanation, John? Is John Roberts? Hello, John?
Good morning, Sam. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just to add two things. First of all, Emmanuel has asked in the chat whether the materials will be available afterwards. I think they're available on the BRS website. So both the video and the leaflet that Nicola was referring to should be available. Just to go back to the point that Vince was raising, I mean, if a party has ratified Annex VIII, and then when a substances Annex VIII has decided that it wishes to decline to accept imports, then it should really establish legislation that doesn't allow imports from any country, whether a party or not, and should also, of course, not allow domestic production either. So it does give countries a lot of flexibility to decide how they wish to control imports into their area. Thanks, Sam. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you so much, John. So, Vince, are you okay now? Hello, Vince?
Yes, yes, very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you so as well. I think I have three more hands there. Dada, Chuto, and then Masimba. Dada first. Dada,
Hello.
please. Yes.
Hello.
Dada, can you
Hello,
help?
Sam.
Yes, Dada. Dr. Dada, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning or good day to everybody. I think
Dada, your line is breaking.
presentation is recorded because there are some points I want to go over, but there's no opportunity to get it clearly. I want to know whether your presentation is recorded.
Okay. Secretariat, can you assure us?
Yes, it is recorded.
Okay, and we can have access to it. Now, my main question is, from the look of things, John, Nicola, maybe you'll be able to, how long of a time do you think we can get the ratification for this amendment?
Yes, thank you, Dada. I can probably go first and attempt to answer that. I suppose it is a difficult question to answer accurately. So I think you're asking how long before the amendment to include Annex VIII would enter into force.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So, I mean, it will take some time, as it does always when we need to wait for the requisite number of parties to ratify a treaty, or in this case, an amendment to a treaty, before it can enter into force. So we imagine that it will take some years before we get that number of parties, 3/4 of all parties, to ratify the amendment, and then it would enter into force 90 days after.
Yeah, quickly, can I just chip in? Because the strength of Annex VIII will be national authorities having a strong legislation to protect ourselves. I don't know how, along the line, how we can ensure that when we are introducing this amendment, there will be enough provision, especially for developing countries, to be able to have a very strong legislation to protect itself from further dumping of this waste. Well, it's not a question, it's like a comment that I think we should put into consideration in the process of this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Dada. Yes. Oh, Nicola, you have some comment more?
No, thank you, Sam. I think that's
Perhaps let me ask my own question in line with that question. John or anybody can help here. Since for now we don't have this voting rights under the convention, at the COP, do we expect all the countries to say yes to this amendment before we can really get it? I mean, or what is it? I don't know whether you get my question. At the COP coming up in May, for now, we don't have any consensus. Apart from consensus, we don't have any voting rights. So in proposing this amendment, do we expect every country to say yes before really we can trigger it for ratification, or what? Or we don't need the full house, so to speak? Anybody can answer my question? Nicola?
I'm sorry, Sam. I'm not sure. Could you just repeat the question one more time?
I said that as a follow-up to Dr. Dada's question, at the COP coming out in May, where we are presenting this amendment,
yes,
we expecting all the parties, so the full house, to say yes before we can get the deal to really move on to the next stage, or what happens if we don't get the full house? Yes.
I see. I apologize, Sam. I just I didn't quite catch it before. Yes, no, to amend the actual text of the convention, consensus is not required for that. Obviously, it's ideal if we can reach a consensus decision to amend the text to add the new Annex VIII, but it can be decided by a 3/4 majority vote.
Okay. Thank you. So it means that amendment can be adopted by a vote if consensus is not possible.
Yes.
Yes.
It
Okay.
can.
Thank you. Yes. Let's hear from Chuto. If I'm not sure that I've made it correctly. Chuto. Yes. Okay.
It's okay. Chuto or Chutu, everything except I'm not from Japan.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, please. Yes.
Okay. My question is quite ambiguous. I wanted to get some information because some days back I was in the SAICEM conference representing Africa for the Labour Group. And as you all know, SAICEM is voluntary. There is no binding element on the SAICEM structures. For the Rotterdam Convention, is there any prerequisite for each country to adopt for the enforcement of the convention for those who have ratified it? Of course, the amendment, I'm considering, let's say everyone is happy, it's okay, now you have a fully convention. But once it's ratified, is there any obligation that the convention falls under which ministry? To make me clear. For example, for the chemicals, we have advocated, the trade unions, because the workers are the first one to be exposed. But when the law came, which is the Dangerous Chemicals Act, I'm taking example of Mauritius, it went under the Ministry of Health, where you don't have any structure for disputes. So each and every day you see violations of the law. But the workers, those who are really exposed, they can't file any complaint. My simple question, is there any structure, for example, for the ILO, you have a committee of experts of freedom of association. For the Rotterdam Convention, is there any structure for enforcement? Please share with me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chuto. Chito, where are you coming from, or where do you work?
I'm a trade unionist. I'm come from the trade unions.
Okay, trade unions. Okay, right.
I'm a labor web.
All right. Response, please.
I wonder if the Secretariat would be able to answer that, or if not, then John. I'm trying to understand. There seem to be several elements to that question. I can perhaps start with what I think I'm hearing, but it would be good to defer if we have someone from the Secretariat who can explain the legal obligations of the convention. But I mean, to begin with, I can say that all parties to who have ratified the convention are bound by the obligations and the rights under the convention. And it's up to each individual government to determine, or each individual country to determine who is their country lead. For example, in Australia, I'm with the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. And so I am one of 2 national focal points for the convention. And so alongside my colleague in the Agriculture Department. And so we are responsible for implementing the obligations under the Convention for Australia. And in doing that, we have legislation in Australia that helps us to implement our obligations under the Convention.
If you do allow me, Nicola, just to be more precise, my country has ratified the Stockholm Convention, the Minamata Convention. But there's no obligation on my country, the enforcement, the board responsible for the enforcement of the convention. There is no prerequisite that all stakeholders should sit on the board, should be represented. For example, in my country, both conventions, they fall on the Ministry of Environment, and labor is excluded. Labor is excluded completely. So today there are many cases where, for example, they are recycling waste like ashes coming from burning of coal, which contains heavy metals, including mercury, but we can't, there is no place that we can make our voice heard. And this satisfies the global structures, because there is no imposition on each government that each stakeholders, at least labor and all this, should be represented, should be taken on board. So it's good. We are discussing for the enforcement. We are consolidating the convention. Once it's ratified, at the level of the country, there is no obligation on them to ensure that all stakeholders are taken on board.
Okay, Chito, I think I get your point, which is more or less at the national level. So the issue is that the convention itself, or the parties, we have a mechanism in place, which is for the Annex III. So, I mean, those mechanisms also apply for the new annex as we are putting in, actually, once it is, agreed upon. But at the national level, I think there should be a way of rallying all the interested ministers or department agencies to really help implementation. So I'm not sure whether in Mauritius you have a mechanism in place, a coordinating mechanism to really ensure implementation at the country level. That is through a legislation or through some even administrative mechanism. I think it should be looked at as quick as possible. I think you can go to the Ministry of Environment or write to the minister, or let your minister write to them and then perhaps look at it. It's important. I'm not sure whether Yvonne is there to maybe add a voice to from the secretarial point of view. Yvonne?
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm not sure if Yet would rather take the question.
Either way, Yvonne, sorry, I didn't see you were online. Good morning, Sam.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, well, I would, sorry, it was about this. Just to, I mean, really to echo the comments and the reflections that Nicola and you already had, that this seems to be really a national level type of issue for each country to decide domestically which authorities would be involved in the implementation of the convention, which authorities would be designated to correspond with the secretariat, so externally, for example. So this would be very much something that's left to the prerogative of each party. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So,
Thank you, Juliet.
yeah, Chitu, I think now you are.
I think I'm right.
Yes.
It's like the copycat of the SACEM structures, because if you left it to each country, then at global level, well, it's okay, we have ratified all conventions, but at national level, it's not enforced. It's only a sort of cosmetics thing. My humble request is to ensure that I think when there are discussions at global level, to ensure that all stakeholders are represented, and put an obligation of those who have ratified the convention to ensure that all stakeholders are taken on board. There ought to be a sort of reporting system.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, Chitu.
Thank you.
I think we have a question from Masimba, Sam.
Yes, Masimba. Please, unmute yourself.
Masimba, you are on mute.
Right. Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Right. Of course, my name is Masimba. I'm from Zimbabwe. I represent an organization called ICA. Now, mine is just an observation. I think the ratification by consensus, which has always been the case, I think has been there for some good reasons. And I feel that the idea of Article 8 is obviously a way to run away from consensus, and we may actually be setting some dangerous precedents, in my view, going forward, especially for developing countries, where tomorrow we will then find that, because we don't agree with the stronger brothers, then people come up with other chapters or other articles. I mean, this is just an observation.
Thank you so much, Masimba. We'll try to address your concern or do a comment, but I think we will also comment on it. So, who take the floor?
Okay.
I can comment if you like.
Yes.
Sam?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, there was a voice coming in, but I'm not sure what happened there. So, yes, Masimba, I think the consensus decision-making is very important in global treaties, and it has been a central part of the Rotterdam Convention. It's very important across many convention processes, but there is already significant precedent for taking decisions by a 3/4 majority vote when consensus cannot be reached. We should always strive to reach consensus in global treaties, but there are occasions when parties who wish to make progress should be able to do so without a small number of parties preventing them from making that progress. There are several multilateral environmental agreements that provide for voting in relation to amendments to specific annexes. For example, the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants and the Convention on Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. These annexes actually relate to measures to ban the manufacture, use or trade, whereas the Rotterdam Convention does not. It simply puts in place prior informed consent procedures and mechanisms. I think it's also important to understand that the presence of provisions that allow for voting and decision making can actually stimulate efforts to reach consensus.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Masimba, let me ask
Yes.
that a little voice to it. You know that the convention is about almost 20 years. I think it was in 2004. Now we are in 2023. It's almost 20 years. So
Yes.
it's quite a long time if we can even assess effectiveness, which has been done already. And you know that if you have been following the COP,
Okay.
you know that for about only about 5 chemicals or so, all the rest got consensus. But these ones, about 98, 99% of all the parties actually really, had agreement with. Left with only about 1 or 2 countries. So the issue is that if Rotterdam Convention is not banning chemicals per se, but then it's for information sharing, we shouldn't be that afraid that we will list the chemicals. It's for us, it's for our benefits. That is why we think that if really, say Africa, 54 countries, about 52 of us think that it's good, let us list it and then have information among for our people. And only 2 countries per se say no. When we say no, the chemical will come all right, but then we don't have the information to share. So at least the Annex VIII will give us a leeway of perhaps share information, whilst the other 2 or 3 countries take time to study the situation and join later. And then it will come to normal. Otherwise, it will be also a disservice to majority of the countries who think that this chemical, we need information. It's important for us. And then we'll try to bring our other colleagues to it. I think it's also in the interest of the other countries as well. Thank you so much. I can see Olubumni Olusanya, my Nigeria friends. Olu, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. I'm sorry that I cannot join earlier, but I'm happy that I've joined. I just want to also make some clarification on this new proposal, And my contribution is that it's in the interest of the African continent to have this proposal, on board, approved by the COPs when we reconvene in May. I want to see it as an innovative way of moving the convention forward in respect of all those chemicals that we have not been able to achieve consensus. Because if you don't do that, we won't have opportunity of information sharing, as Sam has rightly said. And listing this chemical under the new annex does not prevent it for further consideration for listing under Annex VIII when we have full consensus. But in the meantime, where consensus is not available, those who are favorable to listing of such chemicals should be free to have access to information concerning them, so that at the national level, they can also take their precise decision. Like it has been iterated, the convention does not ban chemicals. It is the nation, the parties that have the prerogative of either banning or allow such chemical in their countries. And for them to take that decision, they need informed decision. And this is what this new annex is talking about, the ability to share information with countries to decide whether they will allow such chemical in their country or not. And I think this is very important for Africa. We should look at it critically as a region, because we know in our region we don't have much information on most of these hazardous chemicals. So those who have information, if they don't share them with us through the convention, how do we take decision on our own? So that is why I want to encourage all our people in the continent to look at this new, amendment critically. It is to our benefit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olu, for those for throwing light on those things. Secretary, do you see any other hand? Or Nicola, I don't see any other hand there.
I'm not seeing any at the moment, but let me just scroll through because I can't see everyone on my screen at the same time. Okay. I don't think there are any hands up at the moment.
I think we have some time also. maybe will any one of us want to add or chip in one or two comments whilst perhaps we await a question? Olu, is that your old hand or a new one?
It's a new one. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Sam, I don't know. This webinar is very, very important, but unfortunately, I cannot see most of the African players, the BRS on this platform. Because we didn't share the link on time. Like me now, it was that make other extra effort for me to register and join you. So I think the preparation is not. I believe we didn't do very well because those who will take decision for Africa, the government, the what do you call it, the focal point, they are not on this platform. I believe the purpose of this webinar is to prepare their mind towards the regional meetings so that the decision can be taken easily. But I don't know what happened. So for other regions, I think we should make this correction before for Africa, it may be easier for other regions to support this new proposal. I think we should send the link to them earlier so that people can join early. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olu. You are on point. So the good thing is that this month, all the regional meetings are taking place. As you know, Africa in Senegal, I think the 21st to 23rd or thereabout that week. So, I mean, the amendment will also be discussed as part of the agenda items. And since it's going to be the focal points or institutions that are going to meet there or decision-making people, I think it will be very good. The other regions, I think this morning, the Asia Pacific have had their own. And
Next week.
The GRULAC and the CE may have theirs in course of today or this week. And it's the beginning of it. And they also have the opportunity to also look at them and then discuss them during their regional meetings. So that's a good one. And I believe that we will do our best to get these things across. Thank you so much once again. Nicola and Charles and John or Felix, any comments?
Just checking again for any hands up. I mean, I very much support what you were just saying, Sam, that I think the regional preparatory meetings are a really good opportunity for regions to discuss the amendment proposal and discuss any concerns and the objectives of the proposal. I myself am giving a presentation at the Asia Pacific regional meeting in Bangkok next week, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to have lots of conversations with people there in person, because I think it is much easier to have a discussion in person. Sometimes it's difficult with a webinar platform, and noting the comments from our colleague previously that there are many people who aren't present at this webinar, but I think it would be a really good opportunity to discuss these things in more detail and in person at the regional preparatory meeting. So I hope that will go very well for the African region.
Thank you. I think the good thing is that the Secretariat long ago has sent the amendment to all the parties through their permanent mission in Geneva, Foreign Ministry, and the focal points of focal institutions. So the amendment is already there. So our appeal is that perhaps at the regional meetings, after the discussion, if the focal persons go home, they can pick up the matter and discuss with the authorities before the COP in May. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, indeed. And I wonder whether it's worth going back, Secretariat, if I could ask you to go back one slide. I think we have, yeah, so this is a screenshot from the Rotterdam Convention website. I'm afraid it's not, I don't know about everybody else there. It's a little bit blurry for me on my screen, so I'm sorry about that. But you can see that if you go to the convention tab on the website, and then you go down to amendment proposals. I think it is the title of the link there. And then you follow that, or perhaps it's proposed amendments. And then you can follow that it will take you to the page that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen there. And there's a description there about when the Secretariat sent the information out, and there's a link there to the actual proposal itself, which shows you exactly what the proposed amendments to the text are. And then you can see that there are also links to the video that we showed you earlier in this webinar, and also a brochure that gives you all of the information that was in the presentation plus a little bit more. So hopefully that information is very helpful to all of the participants on the line, and in fact in the regional preparatory meeting discussions as well.
Thank you so much, Nicola. I think we are hitting the 11 hour from Ghana here with GMT. So I'm sure those regions have their own time as well. And I don't see any hand again. So perhaps I would like to call on Charles to give closing remarks for this meeting. For me, it has been very helpful. At least the few questions that we had and the comments have been helpful for us to maybe work further to really get people understand the issue at stake and how we can allay fears, and then we can have a good meeting for people to buy into this amendment, and also perhaps become co-sponsors at the COP. So Charles, if you're available, I'll give the opportunity for you to give your closing remarks.
And perhaps we could ask the Secretariat
It's
just to
11
link
hours.
to the next
Okay.
slide.
Yes, thank you very much for being given this opportunity. Look, I can say most of the issues that I would have asked have been covered, which is quite good. Maybe I should first ask if we are going to have these slides sent to us so that it can help, deepen our knowledge in terms of the preparations. Especially for me, remember the last time when we first met, I said to you this was my first participation to such meetings from my organization, which is Industrial Global Union. So so far, I'm deepening my understanding and knowledge in terms of what to be expected during this upcoming meeting. So I would like to thank you all for having taken part to this meeting of today, which once again has helped enlighten my personal knowledge in terms of what is expected of us as African states regarding, the amendment of this law, if I should say it so. So thank you very much. That's all I can say, and hope to meet you in Dakar. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Nicola, you wanted to say something?
Thank you. I really just want to thank you very much, Sam and Charles, for co-presenting today with me. And I want to thank the Secretariat for organising the webinar, and very much want to thank all of you for participating in this webinar today. And I just want to highlight that we have information there on the screen about if you want to become a co-sponsor. You can contact Michel Chirin at the Swiss government, and his email address is there in the middle of the water on the screen there. And I just want to also emphasize that becoming a co-sponsor does not have any legal or financial implications. It is just a strong signal that a party supports the proposal. So if you want to join the growing list of co-sponsors, then please contact Michel.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, John. Thank you for all of you who participated. From my end here, I say goodbye for now. Until another time, have a pleasant day and week and enjoy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sam. Good night from Australia.
Secretariat, thank you so much, Secretariat, for the
Bye.
kindness.
Bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.